Howdy YouTube. So I decided I needed a new desktop, and after building 5 X220s and a X200, which are going to be for sale, and you can check the specs out in the description on renegadecomputing.org. Also, I forgot to mention the 5 X220s have the latest stable version of Core Boot compiled with ME Cleaner. And I might have a second Libre booted X200 in stock. And now that that advertisement's done, let's talk a little bit about my new desktop. It's going to be a socket 462 system. So these are two Athlon, socket A chips, which one is 2 gigahertz and I believe the other is 1.4 gigahertz. They kind of have a weird naming convention, like this one's the 2400 and this one's the 1800. Might be wrong about the gigahertz on the other chip, but we're going to be using the, 2 gigahertz chip and a few other components. So, one of the other things we're going to be using for this build is a FX 5200, 128 meg. I believe it supports dual monitors. Not quite sure if it can handle the full 1600 by 1200 on DVI, as well as the VGA at the same time at 2048 by 1536. But I do have the monitors to test it, but in the worst case, we'll just go for a CRT monitor for the second VGA output. So the next thing you're going to need for really any desktop build is a power supply. And, I probably picked this one up at a recycling center for free, probably around middle school. And it is a Enermax noise taker. But anyways, it meets P4 standards, which is a little bit odd because Pentium 4 is, a CPU that uses a lot of 12 volt lines. And this one, fortunately though, since it's 450 watts, actually does have a 5 volt at 36 amp hour line. And since the socket A chips I mentioned earlier use about 60 watts, that is good because for our build, we're pretty much going to be using one SD card to IDE converter. A little bit odd in a desktop, but it will end up being at least relatively useful. And the next thing we're going to be using is a standard, SSD, because it turns out this little MSI board over here has SATA. So I don't know how much RAM we're going to put in it, but it's going to be the max I can find. Let's get on to our standard AMD stock heatsink, which I actually think came off one of these boards that have a few other socket A systems. So I think that covers most of the hardware details. Oh yeah, and I actually do have a bezel. And look, I magically found some screws and a screwdriver, which is quite nice. So I haven't worked on something like this in quite a while. So let's see if we can get this in there. I'm going to turn it vertical. Probably have to adjust camera a tad. Maybe add some really sketchy lighting. Sketchy lighting! There we go. We'll just... Ooh, I can tell spooky ghost stories or something. So let's see how this goes in. So I'm guessing fan on bottom. Okay, screw. Okay. Let's put this in right here. Hold it in with my other hand in a really awkward position. And slide it over tab, drop it. You need at least one screw slightly in there before you can begin the process of putting in the other ones. So I should go a little crisscross pattern. Okay, so let's move it to the top, grab our screwdriver. It's okay if they're a little bit misaligned, if we just need to get it basically in there so we can put the other screws. We can always unscrew and rescrew the screws unless you strip them. So, just need to get this ancient power supply in here with this not quite as ancient motherboard, but with a ancient CPU in there. I don't know if that's ancient. In fact, if that's ancient, I'm ancient. So let's go with this. Wonder what low and high does. Oh, it's probably a noise volume thing. By the way, like, I probably should spray this with air duster. Looks relatively clean from the outside. Maybe I'll do it as an afterthought. Oh, it's a little bit hard getting this last screw in here. In fact, I actually think this might be stripped internally. Maybe I'll put it on its side now that it's actually like resting in the right place. There's a little bit of an air gap below. I was thinking about going with a Pentium 3 build at first, but it doesn't have a AGP graphics slot, and I do not have any good PCI cards. So, oh god, gotta adjust the camera. Okay, so let's set it on its side right here, and see if we can get this in. Let's just screw this. Takes a little bit. Well, and this last one I've been trying to get in for a while, but it appears to be either not contacting or the PSU is stripped in some form or another. Not exactly sure. But hey, if it's like that, 3 is, well, kind of okay. I mean, this isn't exactly the most beautiful build in the world exactly, but it's a build. So, just for the hell of it, just for the heck of it, we're going to replace this rusty screw, and I think we do actually have to take out front at some point. So let's get this stuff off. Maybe we should have done this before installing the power supply. Some of these old cases are a little bit weird. You know, we'll get to it when we get to it. Just put the shiny screw in here. And if I run out of screws, I guess rusty screw is going back in. This screw might actually be a different threading. That could be why. I literally just bought, a while back a box of miscellaneous screws for desktops, but I don't actually do that. Yeah, it's a different threading. You have a mess of cords. That's not necessarily a good thing, but it's a thing. And we got a motherboard. Okay, and now to the motherboard. So we got our 2 GHz chip here. We're just gonna insert into the socket, and hopefully everything's clean enough that it'll work down there. If not, we might need to add some air duster after. And it still has a little bit of thermal paste residue. So we're gonna go add a tiny amount of alcohol to this. Just clean up the surface of that die. So while it's drying, we can figure out what RAM we're adding. I assume it's DDR or DDR2. Luckily, RAM slots have different cuts in them, so you know which one to add. This one looks a little bit funky, but it says DDR, so maybe I just misaligned it. Yep, takes DDRs. Oh, here's another matching one, so we'll at least have 512. That's good. Last one, we got a mystery one right here. So we got our 3 sticks of DDR for a total of 768 megabytes of RAM. Not quite sure that's quite what I had in mind. So now that we got that done, we need our applicator for the thermal paste. which I will find shortly. Okay, found it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of thermal paste to this at the end. I'm treating this like a laptop die since there's no heat spreader on the silicone. So we're just going to add a little bit to here, dab here, and it's probably going to get a bit messy, but we can just spread it out evenly, perfectly even. Really surprised that these old chips draw 60 watts. So although I missed the perfect application by putting it on the wrong side, this time we're going to get it correct, although the thermal paste is a tad sloppier. But in that case, it should be able to wobble around a little bit and still have good contact. Now that I grabbed a tiny flathead, we can go like this, and our heatsink will be on nice and tight. So now we get to apply our motherboard back into the system. Okay, now that we have the motherboard all assembled, we just have to put in a few case screws and we should be ready to go. So I already have 6 of them in, so it just needs another 2, and after that we just need to plug in a few cards, and this thing should be able to do a test run. So the FX5200's in there right now, and we're about to see if our computer's going to post. So the switch on this PC is a little bit loose, but in a second we should be able to see some result on the actual computer monitor. I have it plugged into a CRT on the right, and as you can see, it posts. So right now it is giving a floppy drive error, but we can go back in through the BIOS and change that later on. Okay, so let's do some wire management. So basically, from the test footage earlier, you can see that it is quite a bit messy, and I still need to install some of the components. So I zip tied the PNY hard drive, or solid state drive, to the side of the case, and also put in the 3D printed SD card holder. So this one is actually a floppy drive sort of emulator. Sorry about that. It's 4th of July for this recording, so... But anyways, let's actually take a look at some of the sped up footage. So I did also have to do the cables for the lights, but on this era of motherboards, most of the time they're labeled, and it's actually quite easy to set up. Although I did actually have to modify one of the case cables for the power light. So I used my weird lamp contraption thing. It's a high wattage LED bulb, but it will pretty much make everything visible, at least for me doing the work. But this is kind of my least favorite part, is plugging in all the cables into the, well, motherboard. But afterwards I can just zip tie it and have our one SATA port going in there and our floppy drive and ribbon cables. And let's see if we can have a little picture at the end. Also, I did upgrade the RAM to 1 GB. So I guess as a final note, the FX5950 is going to replace the FX5200, mainly due to a slight error. But let's just put the side of the case panels on and get a quick glance at the end result. So this is the final product after all of the cable management, with a few add-in cards and USB and Wi-Fi. So if you may have noticed, between some of the cuts I've actually 3D printed a few items to actually help with airflow and help with attaching our SD card. So One of the 3D prints for the SD card turned out very well, but this glow-in-the-dark filament was a little bit hard to use. It also might have been an error with the print, but either way, after machining it, it looks quite nice. And I kind of like the little glow that comes out through the white filament. So because the print turned out kind of odd, I actually had to take the top of a broken DVD drive to attach it. But after that, although it's still a little bit wobbly, it stays in the case nice and snug. So another added feature, it glows in the dark. Okay, now for a look at our final setup, hardware-wise, but we're going to install Debian on it using my Debian install script. I still need to assign a background to it. And after that, we have it set up with its first operating system, but the cool feature is with the SD card, we can put on a second one and just have it on a single card and swap them out freely. So now for the big reveal of actually why I built this system. I have a copy of Corel Painter, but it's for Windows XP or Windows 2000, and I have the Wacom drivers and tablet, or well, touchscreen with the digitizer. So for this setup, I just decided to go with a Windows 2000 installation on an SD card, but Windows 2000 really does not like being installed off a USB drive. I'm sure there's a way, and if there is a way, I'd, well, like to know. So to save on time, I just decided to take the side panel off and use the other SATA connection to plug in a DVD drive. So after that was done, we could start up Windows 2000. And, well, it's a little bit slow running off an SD card that plugs into a floppy drive connector, but it's at least solid state technically, or flash memory. And you can just switch out the operating system pretty easy. Anyways, peace and have a good one, and happy late 4th of July or Flag Day.